The morning sun cast long shadows across the military base as Captain Marcus Rodriguez stepped out of his quarters, his combat boots echoing against the concrete walkway. 3 years of deployment had hardened him into the kind of officer who commanded respect through action rather than words. His jaw was set in permanent determination, and his dark eyes carried the weight of countless missions behind enemy lines. The base buzzed with its usual morning activity. Soldiers moved with purpose between buildings, their uniforms crisp despite the early hour. Marcus had always found comfort in this routine, the predictable rhythm of military life that kept chaos at bay. Today felt different, though he couldn't quite place why. Staff Sergeant Williams approached at a quick pace, his face bearing the expression of someone carrying urgent news. "Captain Rodriguez, sir. The new commanding officer arrives today. Colonel Barnes wants all senior staff in the briefing room at 0800 hours." Marcus nodded curtly. He had heard rumors about their new CO for weeks. The previous commander, Colonel Morrison, had been reassigned after a successful but costly operation that had left the unit shaken. Whoever was taking over would inherit a group of battle-tested soldiers who had learned to trust each other above all else. The briefing room filled quickly with the familiar faces of his fellow officers. Major Thompson sat reviewing files, his weathered hands steady despite the stress lines around his eyes. Lieutenant Kim checked her watch repeatedly, a nervous habit she had developed during her first deployment. Captain Davis lounged in his chair with the easy confidence of someone who had survived too many close calls to worry about a change in command. Colonel Barnes entered precisely at 0800, his silver hair immaculately groomed and his uniform displaying decades of service ribbons. Behind him walked someone Marcus didn't recognize, though something about her posture suggested military training. She was dressed in civilian clothes, dark slacks, and a simple blouse that did nothing to disguise her athletic build. "Gentlemen, ladies," Colonel Barnes began, his voice carrying the authority of long command. "I want you to meet Sarah Chen. She'll be observing our operations for the next few days before the official change of command ceremony." Marcus studied the woman more carefully. She appeared to be in her early 30s, with black hair pulled back in a practical ponytail and intelligent brown eyes that seemed to catalog every detail of the room. There was something about the way she held herself that reminded him of the career soldiers he most respected, but her civilian attire suggested she might be some kind of consultant or Pentagon observer. After the briefing, Marcus found himself walking behind Sarah as they toured the facility. Colonel Barnes was explaining the base layout, pointing out key buildings and strategic positions. Sarah asked thoughtful questions about defensive capabilities and personnel management that revealed a deeper understanding of military operations than Marcus had expected. During lunch in the officers' mess, Sarah sat alone at a corner table, reviewing what appeared to be personnel files. Marcus had been watching her throughout the morning, intrigued by her quiet competence and the way other officers seemed uncertain how to approach her. She carried herself with the confidence of someone accustomed to command, yet her civilian status created an awkward social dynamic. Lieutenant Kim approached Marcus as he finished his meal. "What do you think about the new observer? She seems to know a lot about military procedure for a civilian." "Maybe she's former military," Marcus replied, though something about that explanation didn't feel complete. "Could be intelligence services or Department of Defense." The afternoon brought combat training exercises, and Marcus was surprised to see Sarah on the sidelines, taking notes as soldiers ran through urban warfare scenarios. She watched with the keen attention of someone evaluating tactical decisions, rather than simply observing routine drills. During a break in training, Major Thompson approached her with obvious curiosity. Marcus moved closer to overhear their conversation, his interest in this mysterious woman growing stronger. "Ms. Chen, if you don't mind me asking, what's your background? Your questions suggest extensive military knowledge." Sarah's smile was polite, but revealed nothing. "I've worked with various military units in different capacities. Each base has its own culture and operational style." It was a diplomatic non-answer that only increased Marcus's suspicions. He had worked with enough intelligence operatives to recognize the careful way she deflected personal questions while appearing cooperative. That evening, Marcus decided to do some investigating of his own. The base gym stayed open until 2200 hours, and he often used the late evening quiet for intense workouts that helped him process the stress of command decisions. As he entered the facility, he was surprised to find it already occupied. Sarah was at the heavy bag, working through a series of combinations that demonstrated serious martial arts training. Her movements were precise and powerful, each strike delivered with the kind of technique that only came from years of dedicated practice. She had changed into workout clothes that revealed the lean muscle definition of someone who maintained peak physical condition. Marcus set up at a nearby bench press, positioning himself where he could watch her workout routine. Her form was flawless, suggesting military hand-to-hand combat training. She moved through defensive maneuvers that were definitely not civilian self-defense classes, but rather the kind of advanced techniques taught to special operations personnel. After 45 minutes, Sarah finished her workout and began cooling down with stretching exercises. Marcus had completed his own routine and was preparing to leave when she finally acknowledged his presence. "Captain Rodriguez, isn't it? Colonel Barnes mentioned you led the successful extraction mission last month." "Yes, ma'am. And you're Ms. Chen, though I suspect there's more to that story than we've been told." Her laugh was genuine but guarded. "There usually is in this line of work." They walked toward the exit together, the evening air cool against their skin after the intensity of their workouts. Marcus found himself studying her profile in the dim light, noting the alertness in her expression and the way she automatically scanned their surroundings. "Your combat techniques are impressive," Marcus said as they reached the building entrance. "Not the kind of training most consultants receive." "Thank you. I found it useful in my various assignments." Again, the careful deflection. Marcus felt his frustration building. He was accustomed to direct communication and clear chain of command. This woman seemed to exist in some gray area that defied his understanding of military protocol. "Look, Ms. Chen, I don't know what your real role is here, but my soldiers deserve to know who they're answering to. If you're evaluating us for some Pentagon review, just say so." Sarah stopped walking and turned to face him directly. In the dim light outside the gym, her expression was serious, but not hostile. "I understand your concern, Captain. Chain of command is essential to unit cohesion. Then help me understand yours. All will be clear soon enough. For now, I need you to trust that I'm here to help, not to disrupt your operations." The next morning brought a tactical exercise that would test the unit's readiness for urban combat scenarios. Marcus had designed the training to simulate the kind of complex environment they might face in their next deployment, with multiple objectives and evolving threat levels. Sarah appeared at the exercise staging area, wearing military fatigues that looked suspiciously like they had been tailored specifically for her. Her equipment was professional grade, and Marcus noticed she carried herself with the easy familiarity of someone completely comfortable in combat gear. Colonel Barnes explained that Sarah would be participating as an observer, but as the exercise began, her involvement became much more active. She moved through the simulation with the tactical awareness of an experienced operator, positioning herself to maintain optimal oversight of multiple team movements. During a particularly challenging phase of the exercise, one of Marcus's junior officers made a critical error that left his squad exposed to simulated enemy fire. Sarah immediately stepped in, providing tactical guidance that demonstrated intimate knowledge of advanced combat strategies. "Second squad, adjust your position 30 degrees northeast," she called out through the communication system. "Use the building corner for cover and establish overlapping fields of fire." Her instructions were precise and tactically sound, delivered with the confidence of someone accustomed to command authority. Marcus found himself both impressed and increasingly puzzled by her expertise. The exercise concluded with his unit achieving all objectives in record time, largely due to Sarah's tactical interventions. As soldiers began post-exercise debriefing, Marcus approached her with growing respect and continued curiosity. "That was exceptional tactical analysis," he said. "You read the battlefield like someone with extensive combat experience." "Thank you, Captain. Your soldiers are well trained. They just needed minor adjustments to their approach. Minor adjustments that required advanced tactical knowledge. Ms. Chen, I've worked with Pentagon consultants before, and none of them could have provided that level of operational guidance." Before Sarah could respond, Colonel Barnes called for all senior officers to gather for the debriefing session. Marcus made a mental note to continue this conversation later. his determination to uncover her true identity growing stronger. The debriefing revealed just how significant Sarah's contributions had been. Major Thompson presented analysis showing improved efficiency in all tactical metrics, with particular improvement in squad coordination and objective completion times. The observer's input proved invaluable, Major Thompson concluded. Her recommendations addressed weaknesses we hadn't even identified. Colonel Barnes nodded approvingly. Ms. Chen brings a unique perspective that will benefit all of us. Marcus studied Sarah's reaction to the praise. She accepted the recognition with professional grace, but he detected something else in her expression, a hint of satisfaction that suggested this was more than academic evaluation. That afternoon, Marcus found himself increasingly preoccupied with solving the puzzle of Sarah Chen. He had called in favors with contacts at various intelligence agencies, but none of them had any information about a consultant by that name. Either her security clearance was higher than his access level, or she was operating under an assumed identity. The evening brought another encounter that would deepen the mystery. Marcus was reviewing mission reports in his quarters when he heard voices in the corridor outside. Through his partially open door, he could see Sarah talking with Colonel Barnes in hushed but intense tones. "The unit is ready," he heard her say. "Captain Rodriguez has maintained excellent operational standards." "His leadership during the extraction mission was exemplary," Colonel Barnes replied, "but the transition will still require careful handling." "Understood, sir. I'll brief him tomorrow." Marcus felt a chill of recognition. The tone of respect in Colonel Barnes's voice suggested he was speaking to a superior officer, not a civilian consultant. The pieces of the puzzle were beginning to form a picture that challenged everything he thought he understood about Sarah Chen. Sleep came reluctantly that night, his mind replaying every interaction he had witnessed. Sarah's tactical expertise, her physical training, her intimate knowledge of military protocol, and now what sounded like preparation for some kind of transition. Marcus began to suspect he had been operating under a fundamental misunderstanding about her role at the base. The next morning brought news that would change everything. Staff Sergeant Williams approached Marcus with orders to report to the base commander's office immediately. As he walked across the compound, Marcus noticed increased activity around the administrative buildings, with personnel moving with the kind of urgent purpose that suggested significant developments. Colonel Barnes's office was crowded with senior staff when Marcus arrived. Major Thompson, Lieutenant Kim, and Captain Davis were already seated, their expressions suggesting they were equally uncertain about the purpose of this gathering. Sarah stood near the window, still in civilian clothes, but somehow looking more official than she had since her arrival. "Gentlemen, ladies," Colonel Barnes began, his voice carrying unusual formality. "I have an important announcement regarding the change of command ceremony scheduled for tomorrow." Marcus felt his pulse quicken. The mysterious nature of their new commanding officer had been a source of speculation throughout the base, with various theories about their background and experience. "Your new commanding officer has been observing operations for the past 3 days," Colonel Barnes continued. "She has extensive special operations experience and comes to us with the highest recommendations from Pentagon leadership." The pronoun hit Marcus like a physical blow. He looked at Sarah with sudden understanding. Pieces of the puzzle finally clicking into place. Her tactical expertise, her combat training, her intimate knowledge of military protocol, and the deference shown by Colonel Barnes all made perfect sense now. Sarah turned from the window to face the assembled officers, her entire demeanor shifting into something Marcus recognized as command presence. When she spoke, her voice carried the unmistakable authority of someone accustomed to absolute obedience. "I am Lieutenant Colonel Sarah Chen, and I will be assuming command of this unit effective tomorrow morning." The silence in the room was absolute. Marcus felt his understanding of the past 3 days reshaping itself around this revelation. Every interaction, every conversation, every moment of growing attraction took on entirely different meaning. Lieutenant Colonel Chen continued, her brown eyes moving across each officer's face with the calculating assessment of a commander evaluating her new subordinates. "I chose to arrive early and observe your operations firsthand rather than rely solely on official reports." Marcus stared at her, remembering every casual conversation, every moment he had questioned her authority. Every time he had treated her like a civilian consultant rather than a superior officer. The implications crashed over him like cold water, professional and personal concerns mixing into a complex storm of emotions. The unit's operational readiness is excellent, she continued. However, there will be some changes to our tactical approach based on my observations. Colonel Barnes gestured toward the assembled officers. Lieutenant Colonel Chen, your senior staff. Major Thompson, Lieutenant Kim, Captain Davis, and Captain Rodriguez. As she acknowledged each name, her gaze lingered on Marcus with an expression he couldn't quite interpret. Professional assessment mixed with something that might have been personal interest, creating a tension that made him acutely aware of every interaction they had shared. I look forward to working with all of you, she said, her voice betraying nothing of the complexity Marcus knew lay beneath her professional exterior. The meeting concluded with administrative details about the change of command ceremony, but Marcus heard little of it. His mind was racing through the implications of this revelation, both for his military career and for the unexpected attraction he had developed for the woman he now knew was his commanding officer. The change of command ceremony took place on the parade ground under a cloudless morning sky. Marcus stood at attention with his fellow officers, watching as Lieutenant Colonel Sarah Chen officially assumed command of their unit. The woman who had spent 3 days as a mysterious observer now wore full-dress uniform with ribbons that told a story of exceptional service. Her service record, read aloud during the ceremony, revealed achievements that explained her tactical expertise. Special operations deployments in 3 different theaters, commendations for valor under fire, and a reputation for innovative leadership that had caught Pentagon attention. Marcus listened with growing respect and mounting confusion about his own feelings. After the ceremony, the unit gathered for the traditional reception in the officers' club. Marcus found himself studying his new commanding officer as she moved through the crowd, accepting congratulations and engaging in the kind of professional small talk that established relationships within the military hierarchy. She had changed from dress uniform into service fatigues, and Marcus noted how the military bearing he had sensed during her civilian disguise now displayed itself openly. Every gesture conveyed confidence and authority, marking her unmistakably as someone accustomed to command responsibility. Major Thompson approached Marcus with 2 cups of coffee, his expression thoughtful. Well, that explains a lot about our mysterious observer. Did you have any idea? None whatsoever, Marcus replied honestly. Though looking back, all the signs were there. She's impressive. The Pentagon wouldn't send someone with that background unless they expected significant challenges ahead. Marcus nodded, though his attention remained fixed on Sarah as she discussed logistics with Captain Davis. He remembered their conversation outside the gym, his frustration with her evasive answers, and the growing attraction he had felt despite his confusion about her role. Now everything was different. She was his commanding officer, which created professional boundaries that couldn't be ignored. Yet the memory of her smile during their brief conversations, the way she had watched him during training exercises, suggested that the attraction might not have been entirely one-sided. The reception continued for another hour before Sarah called for attention. When the room quieted, she addressed her new command with the kind of direct communication Marcus appreciated. I want to thank Colonel Barnes for his leadership during the transition period, she began. This unit has an excellent reputation, and my observations over the past few days confirm that reputation is well-deserved. Her eyes moved across the assembled officers, pausing briefly on Marcus before continuing. However, we face new challenges that will require adaptation and innovation. Our next deployment will test everything you've learned about urban warfare and counterinsurgency operations. The mention of deployment sent a ripple of attention through the room. Marcus felt his pulse quicken as he considered the implications. New commanding officer, new mission parameters, and the complex personal dynamics he now had to navigate. Detailed briefings begin tomorrow, Sarah continued. Senior staff will meet at 600 hours for preliminary mission planning. That's all for now. As the reception dispersed, Marcus found himself uncertain about proper protocol. Should he approach her to offer congratulations? Wait for her to initiate professional contact? The normal social dynamics of military hierarchy had been complicated by their previous interactions. His decision was made when Sarah approached him directly, her expression professionally neutral, but her brown eyes holding hints of the person he had gotten to know during her undercover observation. Captain Rodriguez, I'd like to discuss some operational details with you privately. Are you free this evening around 1900 hours? Yes, ma'am. Where would you like to meet? My office. We need to establish clear working protocols going forward. The formality of her tone sent a clear message about professional boundaries, yet Marcus detected subtle undertones that suggested their previous conversations hadn't been entirely forgotten. He nodded his understanding and watched her move on to similar conversations with other senior staff. The rest of the day passed slowly as Marcus attempted to focus on routine administrative duties while his mind replayed every interaction with Sarah. The woman he had been attracted to was now definitively off-limits, yet she remained the same person who had impressed him with her intelligence and competence. At 1900 hours precisely, Marcus knocked on the door of the commanding officer's office. Sarah's voice called for him to enter, and he found her seated behind the large desk that had belonged to Colonel Morrison. She had personalized the space minimally, with only a few photographs and a small plant adding warmth to the official environment. Please, sit down, she said, gesturing to the chair across from her desk. We need to address the situation directly. Marcus took the indicated seat, maintaining professional posture while studying her expression for clues about the direction of this conversation. Sarah's demeanor was serious but not hostile, suggesting she intended to handle their complicated dynamic with characteristic directness. Captain, I want to acknowledge that my undercover observation created an unusual situation between us, she began. I'm aware that my deception might have led to interactions that wouldn't have occurred under normal circumstances. Ma'am, I understand the necessity of your operational security, Marcus replied carefully. Your assessment methods were effective. Thank you. However, I also need to address the fact that there seemed to be personal interest developing during our conversations. The directness of her statement caught Marcus off guard, though he appreciated her willingness to confront the issue rather than pretend it hadn't happened. He chose his words carefully, aware that his response could affect their professional relationship. I was impressed by your knowledge and competence, he said. That impression hasn't changed with the revelation of your true identity. Sarah's smile was slight but genuine. I was impressed by your leadership style and tactical thinking. You handle complex situations with exactly the kind of innovative approach this unit needs. For a moment, the professional distance between them seemed to diminish, replaced by the genuine connection Marcus had felt during their earlier interactions. Then Sarah's expression became more serious as she addressed the practical realities they faced. That said, we both understand the regulations regarding relationships between officers of different ranks within the same command structure, she continued. Those boundaries exist for important reasons. Yes, ma'am. Unit cohesion and clear authority structures are essential. Exactly. Which means we need to establish professional protocols that maintain appropriate distance while allowing us to work effectively together. Marcus nodded his understanding, though he felt a pang of disappointment at the formal tone. The woman who had laughed with him outside the gym, who had shared subtle moments of connection during their conversations, was now strictly his commanding officer. I want to be clear that your performance and career advancement will be evaluated solely on professional merit, Sarah said. Our previous interactions will have no bearing on my assessment of your capabilities. I appreciate that assurance, ma'am. Good. Now, let's discuss the upcoming mission. Sarah opened a file on her desk and began outlining the operational parameters that would define their next deployment. Marcus listened with growing interest as she described a complex urban environment where traditional military tactics would need to be adapted for civilian population centers. Intelligence suggests we'll be facing insurgent forces who have extensive knowledge of the local terrain, she explained. Our success will depend on building relationships with civilian leaders while maintaining security against asymmetric threats. The mission details revealed why Pentagon leadership had assigned someone with Sarah's background to command the unit. Her special operations experience included exactly the kind of unconventional warfare they would be facing. Your squad leaders will need additional training in cultural sensitivity and civilian interaction protocols, she continued. I want you to develop a program that builds on their existing tactical skills while adding these new capabilities. Marcus found himself impressed once again by her strategic thinking. The mission requirements were complex, but her approach demonstrated the kind of innovative leadership that could turn challenges into advantages. "I'll have preliminary training protocols ready for your review by Friday," he said. "Excellent. I also want your assessment of which squad leaders are best suited for this type of operation. Not every soldier adapts well to the ambiguity of counterinsurgency work." Their conversation continued for another hour, covering logistics, personnel assignments, and tactical considerations. Marcus discovered that working with Sarah in her official capacity was even more engaging than their informal interactions had been. Her command style was collaborative while maintaining clear authority, exactly the kind of leadership he most respected. As the meeting concluded, Sarah stood and moved to the window overlooking the parade ground. Evening shadows stretched across the compound, and the base had settled into its quiet, nighttime routine. "Captain, I want you to know that I chose to reveal my identity to the senior staff together rather than individually because I wanted to avoid any appearance of favoritism," she said, without turning around. "I understand, ma'am. The next few months will be challenging. This unit will be tested in ways that require absolute trust and clear communication." Marcus stood as well, recognizing that the formal meeting was concluding. "You can count on my full support, ma'am." Sarah turned from the window, her expression serious but warm. "I know I can. Your reputation for loyalty and competence is one of the reasons I'm confident about this mission." As Marcus prepared to leave, Sarah spoke again, her voice slightly less formal than it had been during their official discussion. "Marcus, I hope you know that I valued our conversations during my observation period. Getting to know you and the other officers in an informal setting gave me insights that formal evaluations couldn't provide." The use of his first name created a moment of personal connection that reminded him of the attraction he was now required to set aside. "I'm glad I could help with your assessment process. Sarah?" Her smile acknowledged the mutual use of first names, a brief return to the personal connection they had shared before military protocol intervened. Then her expression became professional again, as she reminded them both of the boundaries that now governed their relationship. "Thank you for your time this evening, Captain. I'll see you at the senior staff meeting tomorrow morning." Marcus left her office with mixed emotions. Professional excitement about the upcoming mission competed with personal disappointment about the relationship that could never develop. Sarah Chen was everything he admired in a leader and a person, but she was now definitively beyond reach. The next few weeks established a routine that highlighted both the promise and frustration of their situation. Marcus worked closely with Sarah on mission planning, and their professional partnership proved exceptionally effective. Her strategic vision combined with his tactical expertise created innovative solutions to complex operational challenges. During training exercises, he watched her work directly with soldiers, earning their respect through competence and genuine concern for their welfare. She pushed them hard but fairly, and Marcus saw his unit's capabilities improving under her leadership. Yet every professional interaction carried undercurrents of personal attraction that both of them carefully ignored. Sarah maintained absolute correctness in their official dealings, while Marcus focused on supporting her command decisions with loyal professionalism. The tension came to a head during a late-night planning session 3 weeks after the change of command. Marcus had been working in the tactical planning room when Sarah arrived to review the training schedules he had prepared. "Captain, these look excellent," she said, studying the detailed programs he had developed for cultural sensitivity and urban warfare training. "Your approach addresses all the competency gaps I identified." "Thank you, ma'am. I think the combination of classroom instruction and practical exercises will give our soldiers the skills they need." They worked together for 2 hours, refining details and discussing implementation strategies. The intensity of their focus created an atmosphere of shared purpose that reminded Marcus of why he had been attracted to her intelligence and dedication. As they concluded their work, Sarah gathered the papers and prepared to return them to her office safe. Marcus stood to leave as well, but found himself hesitating at the door. "Sarah, can I ask you something?" She looked up from the files, her expression cautious but not unwelcoming. "What is it?" "Do you ever regret the way things worked out? The timing, I mean." For a moment, her professional mask slipped, revealing the person he had gotten to know during her undercover observation. "Marcus, There are a lot of things in military life that involve sacrifice. This is just one of them. But do you regret it? Sarah was quiet for several seconds, studying his face with the kind of careful attention she brought to tactical assessments. When she spoke, her voice was softer than her usual command tone. I regret that circumstances don't allow us to explore what might have developed between us, she said honestly. But I don't regret accepting this command or the professional relationship we've built. Her honesty deserved an equally honest response. I feel the same way. You're an exceptional officer, and working with you has been one of the most rewarding experiences of my career. Thank you. That means a great deal coming from someone with your reputation. They stood looking at each other across the small planning room, both acknowledging the attraction that could never be acted upon and the professional partnership that had grown despite those limitations. We should probably go, Sarah said finally. Early meeting tomorrow. Yes, ma'am. As they walked toward the exit together, Marcus felt a sense of resolution about their situation. The personal connection was real and mutual, but their commitment to professional excellence was stronger than individual desires. Outside the building, they separated to walk to their respective quarters. Marcus watched Sarah's figure disappear into the darkness, knowing that their relationship would remain forever defined by duty, honor, and the complex sacrifices required by military service. The upcoming deployment would test everything they had built together as a professional team. Whatever challenges lay ahead, Marcus was confident that Lieutenant Colonel Sarah Chen was exactly the leader their unit needed, even if she could never be anything more to him personally. The deployment came 6 weeks later, taking the unit to a war-torn urban center where government forces struggled to maintain control against well-organized insurgent groups. The city's narrow streets and dense population created exactly the kind of complex environment that tested everything Marcus and Sarah had planned during their intensive preparation. Their forward operating base was established in a former school building, its concrete walls scarred by bullet holes and its classrooms converted into command centers and sleeping quarters. Sarah had chosen the location personally, recognizing its strategic value for both defensive positions and civilian outreach programs. The first month of operations proved the value of their innovative training approach. Marcus watched his squad leaders adapt quickly to the delicate balance between security operations and community engagement that defined successful counterinsurgency work. Sarah's leadership style proved equally effective in this challenging environment. She moved through the base with the kind of visible confidence that reassured soldiers while maintaining the tactical awareness that kept everyone alive. Marcus found himself admiring her ability to make complex decisions under pressure, often consulting with him and other senior staff, but never hesitating when action was required. Their professional partnership deepened under operational stress. Marcus's tactical expertise complemented Sarah's strategic vision, creating a command team that anticipated problems and developed solutions before crises could develop. The mutual respect they had built during training translated into seamless cooperation during actual operations. Yet the dangerous environment also intensified the personal connection they both struggled to ignore. Shared risks and close quarters created moments of intimacy that tested their commitment to professional boundaries. The crisis that would change everything began on a Tuesday morning when intelligence reports indicated a major insurgent offensive planned against government facilities throughout the city. Sarah convened an emergency planning session that would determine their response to this escalating threat. The attacks are coordinated to begin at 0600 tomorrow, she announced to the assembled senior staff. Intelligence suggests they're targeting the municipal building, the police headquarters, and the electrical power station. Marcus studied the tactical map, noting the geographic spread of the intended targets. They're trying to create chaos across multiple sectors simultaneously. Classic insurgent strategy. Exactly. Which means we need to anticipate their approach while protecting civilian populations, Sarah replied. I want 3 teams positioned to respond rapidly to any of these locations. Major Thompson raised concerns about dividing their forces across such a wide area. Ma'am, we risk being too thin to respond effectively if they concentrate their attack on a single target. That's a calculated risk, Sarah acknowledged. But allowing them to succeed at any of these targets would undermine government authority and civilian confidence. The planning session continued for 4 hours, as they developed detailed response protocols for each potential scenario. Marcus found himself impressed once again by Sarah's ability to balance competing priorities while maintaining focus on their primary mission objectives. As the meeting concluded, Sarah asked Marcus to remain behind for additional tactical coordination. The other officers filed out, leaving them alone in the converted classroom that served as their command center. "I want you to take personal command of the team assigned to the municipal building," she said. "Intelligence suggests that's the most likely target for their primary assault." "Understood. What about coordination with the other teams?" "You'll have direct radio contact with me here at Base Command. I'll be monitoring all three situations and can redirect resources as needed." Marcus nodded, though he felt concern about Sarah's plan to remain at the base rather than taking field command herself. "Ma'am, your tactical experience might be more valuable in the field." "My command responsibility is to maintain overall coordination," she replied firmly. "Besides, I need someone I trust absolutely in charge of the most critical defense." The personal trust implicit in her statement created a moment of connection that transcended their professional roles. Marcus looked into her brown eyes and saw not just his commanding officer, but the woman he had come to care about deeply. "Sarah, if something goes wrong tomorrow—" "Nothing will go wrong," she interrupted, her voice carrying absolute confidence. "We've planned for every contingency." "You can't plan for everything in combat. You know that as well as I do." Sarah's expression softened slightly as she acknowledged the truth of his statement. "Then I trust you to adapt and overcome whatever we haven't anticipated." They spent another hour reviewing tactical details and communication protocols. But Marcus remained distracted by an uneasy feeling about the upcoming operation. Sarah's plan was tactically sound, but something about the intelligence reports felt incomplete. That evening, Marcus found himself unable to sleep despite the physical exhaustion of weeks in combat conditions. He walked the perimeter of their defensive positions, checking on sentries and reviewing the preparations his team had made for the morning's expected attack. The night air carried the distant sounds of a city under stress, occasional gunfire, and the rumble of military vehicles moving through empty streets. Marcus had learned to read these urban rhythms, distinguishing between routine patrols and the kind of increased activity that suggested imminent conflict. At 00:0300 hours, his unease proved justified when the first explosions echoed across the city. Marcus immediately contacted Base Command, where Sarah's voice confirmed his worst fears. "Multiple detonations at the electrical power station," she reported. "They moved the timeline up by 3 hours. Any word from Major Thompson's team?" "They're engaging insurgent forces now. Heavy resistance, but they're holding position." Marcus gathered his squad leaders and began moving toward their assigned position at the municipal building. The streets were darker than expected due to power outages from the electrical station attack, and the familiar urban landscape had become a maze of shadows and potential threats. They reached the municipal building to find it already under sporadic fire from insurgent positions in surrounding buildings. Marcus deployed his teams according to the defensive plan they had rehearsed, but the actual tactical situation proved more complex than their intelligence had suggested. "Base Command, this is Rodriguez," he radioed to Sarah. "We have eyes on at least 30 insurgent fighters, possibly more. They're better armed and organized than intelligence indicated." "Understood. Hold your position. Reinforcements are en route." The battle developed into exactly the kind of urban warfare that tested every skill Marcus had developed during his military career. His soldiers moved through the building with practiced efficiency, establishing defensive positions while maintaining fields of fire that protected civilian areas. For 2 hours, they held their ground against increasingly aggressive attacks. Marcus found himself moving between positions, coordinating defensive fire and adapting to changing tactical situations as insurgent forces probed for weaknesses in their defenses. The crisis peaked when insurgent forces attempted a coordinated assault from 3 directions simultaneously. Marcus realized that his defensive positions, effective against smaller attacks, wouldn't hold against this level of sustained pressure. "Base Command, we need immediate support," he radioed to Sarah. "They're about to overrun our eastern perimeter." "Reinforcements are still 20 minutes away," came her reply. "Can you hold?" Marcus assessed the tactical situation with the kind of rapid calculation that separated experienced combat leaders from those who hesitated under pressure. The honest answer was probably not, but retreat would leave civilians exposed and surrender a strategically important position. "We'll hold," he responded. What followed was the longest 20 minutes of Marcus's military career. His soldiers fought with the kind of disciplined courage that justified every hour of training they had completed under Sarah's command. They gave ground slowly and strategically, making insurgent forces pay for every advance. When reinforcements finally arrived, Marcus's team had held the municipal building but paid a significant cost. 3 soldiers wounded, ammunition nearly exhausted, and defensive positions that wouldn't survive another coordinated assault. The insurgent forces withdrew as additional government units secured the surrounding area, leaving Marcus and his survivors to assess the aftermath of their successful defense. As medics treated the wounded and ammunition was resupplied, Marcus felt the familiar mixture of relief and exhaustion that followed intense combat. Sarah's voice crackled through his radio 30 minutes later. "Rodriguez, what's your status?" "Building secure, 3 wounded, no fatalities. We held the position." "Outstanding work. Begin consolidation and prepare for possible follow-up attacks." "Roger that. How did the other teams fare?" Major Thompson's team successfully defended the police headquarters. The power station was damaged but not destroyed. Overall, we achieved our objectives. As his team established security for the night, Marcus reflected on the day's events. Sarah's tactical planning had proved sound despite the intelligence failures, and her confidence in his ability to adapt to changing circumstances had been justified. Yet he also recognized that their success had come at the cost of exposing just how dangerous their operational environment had become. Future missions would require even greater innovation and risk-taking. The next morning brought a debriefing session that would address both tactical lessons learned and strategic implications for their continuing mission. Marcus arrived at the command center to find Sarah reviewing after-action reports with the focused intensity he had come to recognize as her approach to learning from experience. "Captain, excellent work yesterday," she said as he joined the briefing. "Your tactical adaptations under pressure were exactly what the situation required." "Thank you, ma'am." The soldiers performed exceptionally well. They did, which raises questions about our intelligence capabilities and force protection protocols. The debriefing continued for 2 hours as they analyzed every aspect of the previous day's operations. Sarah's questions were probing but fair, designed to identify improvements rather than assign blame. As the formal session concluded, Sarah asked Marcus to remain behind for additional discussion. When they were alone, her demeanor shifted slightly from commanding officer to the person he had come to know through their shared experiences. "Marcus, I need to ask you something, and I want an honest answer," she said. "Do you think my decision to remain at base command rather than taking field leadership was the right choice?" The question surprised him with its directness and underlying vulnerability. Sarah was asking not just for tactical assessment, but for personal validation of her command decisions. "Your coordination from base command allowed you to manage 3 separate situations simultaneously," he replied honestly. "Field leadership at any one location would have limited your ability to control the overall operation. But you could have used additional experienced leadership at the municipal building." "We could have, but the mission was successful because you were able to redirect resources where they were needed most. Command decisions sometimes require personal sacrifice." Sarah's smile acknowledged his understanding of the difficult choices that defined military leadership. "Thank you. I needed to hear that from someone whose tactical judgment I trust." Their conversation was interrupted by an urgent communication from base defense that would change the entire dynamic of their relationship. Staff Sergeant Williams burst into the command center with barely controlled panic. "Ma'am, we have incoming mortar fire. The base is under direct attack." The next minutes unfolded with the chaotic intensity that defined combat situations. Sarah immediately began issuing orders for defensive positions while Marcus coordinated the response of available personnel. Mortar rounds impacted throughout the compound, sending concrete fragments and dust clouds across the enclosed space. Sarah moved with calm efficiency toward the communication equipment that would allow her to coordinate with external support. That was when the round hit directly outside the command center, sending a shockwave through the building that knocked both of them to the ground. Marcus felt debris raining down as he struggled to regain his bearings in the sudden darkness created by destroyed lighting. "Sarah!" he called out, his voice muffled by the ringing in his ears. "Here," came her reply from somewhere near the overturned desk. "I'm okay." Marcus moved toward the sound of her voice, navigating by feel through the debris-filled space. Emergency lighting flickered on intermittently, revealing the devastation that had transformed their command center into a dangerous obstacle course. He found Sarah pinned beneath a fallen beam that had crashed down from the ceiling. She was conscious and alert, but clearly unable to free herself from the heavy wooden structure that had trapped her legs. "How bad is it?" he asked, kneeling beside her to assess the situation. "Nothing broken, but I can't move. The beam is too heavy." Marcus examined the fallen timber, calculating angles and leverage points while listening to continued mortar impacts outside. The wooden beam was substantial, probably weighing several hundred pounds, but positioned in a way that might allow him to lift it enough for Sarah to escape. "I'm going to try to lift this. When I do, you need to pull yourself clear immediately." "Marcus, you can't lift that alone. Get help." "No time. They're walking mortar fire across the compound systematically. This building could be next." Marcus positioned himself at the optimal leverage point and began applying upward pressure. The beam resisted initially, then began to rise slowly as he strained against its weight. "Now, Sarah, move!" She pulled herself clear just as Marcus's strength gave out, and the beam crashed back down. Both of them were breathing hard from exertion and adrenaline as they assessed their escape from what could have been a fatal trap. "Thank you," Sarah said, her voice carrying emotion beyond professional gratitude. "Just doing my job, ma'am." "No, Marcus. That was well beyond duty requirements." They made their way carefully through the damaged command center toward the exit, supporting each other over debris and unstable rubble. Outside, the compound was returning to normal defensive posture as the mortar attack concluded. Staff Sergeant Williams approached with obvious relief. "Ma'am, Captain, are you injured?" "Minor cuts and bruises," Sarah replied. "Status of the base?" "3 buildings damaged, 5 wounded, no fatalities. The attackers withdrew after 20 minutes. Establish alternate command post in Building C. I want damage assessments and casualty reports in 30 minutes." As Sarah resumed command responsibilities, Marcus found himself studying her with renewed appreciation. Even injured and shaken by the attack, she immediately focused on the welfare of her soldiers and the security of their position. Later that evening, after damage control and medical treatment had been completed, Sarah asked Marcus to meet her at the alternate command post. She had been treated for minor injuries and pronounced fit for duty, but he could see the exhaustion in her posture. "I wanted to thank you properly for what you did today," she said when they were alone in the makeshift office. "Any officer would have done the same thing. Not any officer would have had the physical capability or quick thinking to get me out of there," she replied firmly. "You risked your own safety to save mine. Sarah, you would have done the same thing for any of your soldiers. That's the kind of leader you are." She was quiet for several moments, studying his face with the kind of careful attention that had characterized their relationship from the beginning. When she spoke again, her voice carried a vulnerability he had rarely heard. "Marcus, the regulations exist for important reasons, but today reminded me that nothing in life is guaranteed. Military service involves risks that can end everything without warning. That's true for all of us. Yes, but it's also true that some opportunities only present themselves once. The question is whether you're willing to act on them despite the potential consequences." Marcus felt his pulse quicken as he recognized the direction of her thoughts. The professional boundaries that had defined their relationship were being questioned in the context of mortality and shared danger. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that nearly dying today made me realize that following every regulation perfectly doesn't guarantee anything except regret for chances not taken." Sarah moved closer to him, her brown eyes reflecting the same attraction he had been forced to suppress for months. The space between them seemed charged with possibility and risk. The regulations still exist, Marcus said quietly. The reasons for them haven't changed. No, they haven't. But my perspective on what matters most has changed. She reached up to touch his face, her fingers tracing the line of a cut he had received during their escape from the damaged building. The gesture was intimate and gentle, creating a moment of connection that transcended their military roles. Sarah, if we do this, there's no going back to purely professional relationship. I know. The question is whether you want to try something beyond what regulations allow. Marcus looked into her eyes and saw not just his commanding officer, but the woman who had impressed him with her intelligence, courage, and integrity. The attraction that had been building since their first conversation had only grown stronger through shared dangers and professional partnership. He answered by kissing her, gently at first, then with the passion of months of suppressed attraction finally finding expression. Sarah responded with equal intensity, her arms pulling him closer as they acknowledged feelings that could no longer be denied. When they separated, both were breathing heavily and acutely aware that their relationship had crossed a line that would change everything. This complicates everything, Marcus said softly. Yes, it does. But some things are worth the complications. What happens now? Sarah smiled with the confidence he had always admired. Now we figure out how to balance our personal feelings with our professional responsibilities. It won't be easy, but nothing worthwhile ever is. The unit comes first. Always. Agreed. But that doesn't mean we can't find ways to be together that don't compromise our effectiveness as leaders. Outside the makeshift command post, the base continued its normal evening routine. Soldiers moving through their duties, unaware that their commanding officers had begun a relationship that would test every principle they held about duty, honor, and the complex sacrifices required by military service. Marcus and Sarah both understood that the path ahead would be difficult, requiring careful navigation of military regulations and unit dynamics. Yet they also recognized that their partnership, both professional and personal, had been forged in shared danger and mutual respect. The war around them continued, bringing daily challenges that would test their leadership and their relationship. But they faced those challenges together, united by love that had grown despite regulations designed to prevent it, and strengthened by the knowledge that some bonds transcend the boundaries that others might accept as absolute.